It's been nearly 3 years since my very first boss rank. Back then I was playing through a certain notoriously difficult series when I became captivated by every boss within. Vanguard butt-slamming me into the Nexus for my first death, stumbling upon a legendary warrior only to discover his tragic fate and duel him for the right to succeed where he couldn't, descending into the depths of Broom Tower into a clash amongst the ashes against the rebellious knight who embraced the darkness. The ear-to-ear grin I had when the Holy Blade found his guiding moonlight, all the way to the final battle with Gale amidst a desolate wasteland for the Dark Soul. These memories are moments in gaming that I will always cherish. So naturally, knowing the creativity and love that From Software put into the Souls series, my hype was through the roof for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I would like to thank Activision for providing me with a copy of the game. From the moment they did, I've been binging it endlessly to squeeze every drop of content that it has to offer. And it has a lot. Seriously, by my count without repeats, there are 17 bosses and 19 mini-bosses, with bosses being enemies that award you memories and mini-bosses being enemies that award you prayer beads or extraordinary rewards. So with that clean divide and distinction in mind, I'll be splitting my ranking into 2 videos, one for the bosses and one for the mini-bosses. With this being my first playthrough, keep in mind that I'm centering my entire ranking around that experience and it is entirely my own opinion. I'll be sure to give you all a chance to participate in a community ranking in the near future when more people have seen all the game has to offer. Without further ado, here are the Sekiro Shadows Die Twice bosses ranked from easiest to hardest. Number 17, the Great Serpent. If you're aphodophobic, then you'd better avert your eyes. In layman's terms, if the idea of a snake the size of a skyscraper sounds terrifying to you, get ready to bob, weave, and maybe cry in the corner. But never fear, this boss is bringing up the butt of our list, so it must be easy, right? Right you are, because you won't be doing actual battle with the snake, at least not in the traditional sense. No, instead you need to intuitively navigate the arena to the point where you can one-shot it. Sound familiar? In reality, the fight is nothing like that. Rather than have an area littered with standard and, dare I say, horrendously irritating enemies, it's just you and the boss. As you move throughout the arena, you use all the navigational tools you've picked up like grappling, stealth, wall hugging, and climbing. The snake will follow you and its positioning is your cue to use the environment to figure out how to proceed. Once you reach the end, you get to hide in a little hut and go for the one-shot. Now today's video isn't to debate the quality of the bosses, that's for another time. But for its design in terms of difficulty, I do find the snake's movements to be intuitive in guiding you. Every time you move to the next segment, the snake moves in a specific way that encourages the player to move along the correct path. That makes it pretty damn easy. Plus, grappling, wall hugging, stealth movement, and the like are all trivial to utilize compared to the combat system. The only challenge here is that if you don't follow the relatively straightforward pathing, you'll get gobbled up and have to do it all over. Personally, even that wasn't enough to get me. I just hid behind a rock when I was seen and it forgot about me eventually. Thank you, Stealth Souls. Now you may debate if this is even a boss in the first place. It has no health and there is no direct combat. Well, to me personally, a boss can be something in a non-traditional sense that is unique and deviates heavily from the standard gameplay loop. I would say this is quite the creative sequence and deserving of a mention. On the topic of no health, it obviously doesn't need any because it only has 1 HP. As for the combat, you just didn't find the real fight, did you? Just jump down here and oh, it's exactly like Ancient Wyvern. And before you get on me for not counting the Great Koi, all you do is swim past it for 20 seconds and then feed it to poison it to death. Then again, you could argue that chucking the bait is an act of combat. I'll leave that one up to you all. For the lack of serious danger, good intuitive design that reinforces that point, and being comparatively easy in a game that has a lot of difficult combat challenge, the snake brings up the bottom of the list. Number 16, Folding Screen Monkeys. I've ripped on FromSoft for years for not being able to make a worthwhile puzzle fight, and it's because they too often try to involve mediocre combat segments with some type of debatably clever trick, but once you know the trick, it's all too easy or too bullshit. Well, you could say the same for these monkeys. They're for running around, and once you know their trick, it's easy as pie. But in an initial playthrough, you might be left with your head scratching. For the first monkey, he follows you from the very beginning invisible. I was going through all these mental gymnastics thinking there was some sophisticated, deep mechanic that would challenge every fiber of my brain. Nope. Turn around, smack him, bag him, and tag him. For the green monkey, he follows a set route, and in the middle, you need to hit a bell to stun and get him. The purple monkey has great eyesight, so you need to open a door to bring in the wind and do an execution from the roof once he can no longer see. And for the last, you just need to sneak up on him. The only threat in this fight are terror chimps that show up regularly once you've killed a monkey. First there's 1, 2 after 2 are down, and then 3 for the final. They're really easy to deal with though, with the only cause for concern being terror, but that's that's so easy to manage with the size of the arena and just running away. If you have the skill allowing you to gain HP back on death blows, then you can farm any HP they take from you as well. But that's okay, because this isn't a fight about being difficult in terms of combat, it's about solving a puzzle. And this time around, I think they did a pretty solid job of creating enough of a challenging one. Then I realized they added an NPC that tips you off to all their behaviors. Between that and merely looking around at the obvious signs, unless you get overtly lost, it isn't too much to figure out. And you know, speaking of mental gymnastics, I'm trying to find some way to justify these monkeys being at least a little bit hard, but they're not. And on repeat playthroughs, this is bound to be a bump in the road. But for a first playthrough, I'll give it at least a little bit of credit for stumping me for the 20 minutes the fight took. That's longer than it took me to one-shot the snake, and at least I had to one-shot 4 things this time among all their comrades. Man, I wonder if slaughtering all these apes is gonna anger some sort of alpha primate. Nah. While I do appreciate the brain teaser and give it the nod over the snake due to there being actual danger once you know the solution, the minuscule nature of said danger is what sets the folding screen monkeys as the second easiest boss in Sekiro. Number 15, Divine Dragon. Okay, I can't wait till the quality video to say, holy Dragon Balls, the visual design of this fight is breathtaking. Thank you for letting me get that out of my system. The fight itself likely won't take your breath away from strain though, at least not too much. The first phase of this fight is laughable. Get in the middle of these decaying roots and spin to win. The whirlwind spin makes such short work of these weeds that it's a wonder why they bothered to include it. Well, let's be real. They did it for the bait. The whole time I was weed whacking, I was saying to myself, nah dude, just wait. Just you fucking wait. When phase 2 hits, it's gonna be like BAM! But as the darker roots spawned, I began to get worried that my gardening duties were gonna go unrewarded. If they had, this would certainly be the easiest fight in the game. Thankfully, my worries weren't realized and the dragon takes gorgeous form. I fully expected taking on something this big to be some sort of crazy deflect challenge, but the reality is a lot easier. Just run up to the roots extending upward while dodging a few simple air slashes and send a fistful of lightning at the dragon. It'll blow you back a couple of times so you can rinse and repeat. Once I understood what to do, swinging back and forth to dodge the swings and grab the lightning was trivial. But this fight's one moment of notable danger is toward the end when it lowers the roots and fires off a load of slashes at various angles. This caught me off guard and I got whacked quite a bit, though admittedly it was because I assumed I needed to run all the way up to the beast itself for a death strike, but really you just wait for the roots to come back for that final epic lightning slam. It's a gorgeous piece of eye candy and I do enjoy what they did here. I think while simple, what they did works mechanically far better than what I originally imagined with swordplay against it. That said, even if this poses a larger threat to your life than the previous 2 stealth and puzzle fights, it's not nearly as much as the rest of our list. Number 14, GENICHIRO, Way of Tomo. You fight GENICHIRO 3 times in this game, and I think it makes thematic sense that the final is the easiest. Really, he's just a teaser for what's coming next, and even if he did manage to secure a mortal blade of his own, it doesn't change our victory over him in the mid-game. And you've had plenty of upgrades since then. This fight is largely the same as the final phase of that second fight, with the biggest addition being charged slashes of the mortal blade. These serve to make him even easier though. If you rotate behind him in the opener, this will let you get at least 2 hits in straight to his vitality, if not more. After that, it's almost always a fight with him on the ropes against your attacks. As long as you are halfway decent at deflects, his posture bar should be climbing and climbing without much issue. The only real threat are the unblockable attacks. We'll be seeing these as problematic a lot throughout today's video, and it's because they require a specific input to be managed appropriately, and you have to decide in a flash. For GENICHIRO though, I found his tells to be very clear. Either he lowers and charges forward, or does a low sweep. With previous experience fighting against him, a game's worth of getting good at the combat, and mechanics that leave him open fairly often, GENICHIRO's final form can't pass that of his counterpart or the majority of our list. Number 13, Gyubu Mastaka Oniwa. I can't tell you how uncontrollable my thirst was for this guy. We'll talk plenty about mini-bosses in their respective video, but let's just say I was aching to get into a more traditional boss fight. When I saw the war-torn battlefield on the horizon, I instantly lit up with glee. He didn't disappoint either. Oniwa is a solid early game challenge that isn't too overwhelming. Much of this fight for me relied on my ability to counter or block as he came by, then slice up some horse ass. The grappling hook allows you to keep pace with him if you prefer it that way, but if you don't, it mostly becomes a battle of jousting. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but this was the first time I felt what I'll describe as the click. In contrast to previous parts of the game, I was starting to shed my habits of using step to avoid everything and get more aggressive with attacks and deflects. With him being the first true boss, he's rather forgiving about it, though not so much that he's as simple as those below him. Nah, he swings his spear around like some sort of drunkard. Following the pattern and deflecting it was too much for me, so I died a few times, but once I got the hang of it, it was so satisfying. Really, Oniwa isn't at 13 because he's easy. I wouldn't call him easy for a first playthrough at all. He's a decent challenge, especially with your low health and gourd count this early on. It's more so that he's a pretty average challenge compared to his peers, which are only going to grow more difficult as we continue. Number 12, GENICHIRO ASHINA.
I'm back.
Simply put, GENICHIRO ASHINA atop the castle is very similar to the Tomo variant, he just has a heck of a lot more health to make it a bigger challenge. In fairness, there's another boss directly following the Tomo GENICHIRO, so it makes sense that he wouldn't be insanely difficult. The thing is, his difficulty like Oniwa felt average compared to everything else. This is because GENICHIRO rewards you attacking him relentlessly as long as you can deflect well enough. His posture doesn't degrade too slowly if you keep up the heat, and you can whip through the first 2 health bars without much effort. The lightning section somehow feels easier, with the only threat being the lightning attacks. Of course, if you can time it right, you can send those flying back at him. I say all of this in hindsight, which as usual is 2020. When I first fought him, I was trying my best to use steps as dodges and play a wait and bait strategy. That is punished severely here, and it took me quite a few deaths to realize what I was doing wrong. Thank God I realized it, because that was when the combat system finally clicked for me. It's almost rhythmic in nature. You attack deliberately without button mashing. Each time you press, you watch for the enemy's deflection. Once that happens, it's your turn to deflect. The difficulty comes in what the enemy throws at you, because if you can deflect a good amount and block the rest, you're open to continue putting the pressure on. What held me back was my experience in Souls. I had a nasty habit of instinctively pressing circle to step like you would roll in those games. And though sometimes it would work against simpler enemies, most of the time I would get punished by severe tracking and lack of significant iframes. But that's because it isn't meant to be used as a dodge through attacks, it's used for positioning and to move away from them if needed. It took me so long to realize this and led to a lot of frustration in the early hours even though I was still enjoying the game. But once it clicked, I never looked back. I have GENICHIRO to thank for that. But of course, this is about his difficulty. I can talk about deflecting well all I like, but it's not easy until you learn enemy patterns. GENICHIROs are far from the most complex in the game, but they are relentless and can easily wear down your posture and health if you aren't careful. Still, that lack of complexity in his attack patterns makes this fight easier than what's to come on this list, even if it is a solid challenge. Oh yeah, before we move on, if you were curious, fighting him in the tutorial is the same as the first 2 parts of this fight, and yes, it is possible to beat him. That would be a big challenge in the early game for sure, but since you lose the battle no matter what, I don't think it's worth ranking separately. Number 11, Emma the Gentle Blade. At a pivotal moment in the game, you have a choice to obey the Iron Code, follow your father down the path of an immovable shinobi, and forsake your young master. If you do so, Emma will not take this betrayal lightly, which means you're in for an ass whooping. No joke, I found Emma to be significantly harder than GENICHIRO, even though the thought is generally the same here. Just attack relentlessly and deflect as required. But again, that's like saying just press the win button. The reality is that Emma varies her combo timings in more erratic ways that make it challenging to deflect well, and she does dramatic amounts of damage if you get caught in them. She employs the ASHINA arts like a master and will obliterate you from across the map if you get careless. I actually found the hardest part of this fight to be the actual initial engagement. Once you're trading blows, it's easier to block, deflect, and hit, but when you have distance to close, she definitely has the advantage in terms of speed. This can sometimes put you on the ropes, and healing here is quite difficult with the aforementioned speed. Her grab also has god tier tracking. I can't count how many times I got suplexed into oblivion. The final piece is that with another boss fight coming directly after, this mind game of trying to do this battle flawlessly to save HP and gourd stocks can make you buckle under the pressure at times. Even with all that in mind, she only has 1 HP bar, and once you get her timings down, it's not too unrealistic to beat her with just a gourd or 2 spent. I even managed to get through without taking damage a few times. Still, the path to get here was no easy feat, so shout out to Emma for having superior sword skills to GENICHIRO. Number 10, Corrupted Monk. This guy reminds me weirdly of those fat ministers in Dark Souls 3. That is if they had a giant glaive of doom. Corrupted Monk only has 1 HP bar and no second phase. Since posture regenerates slowly the lower your vitality, the monk in particular seemed to leave himself open to vitality damage, and I took that tactic. The problem was that this again took me back to Souls habits. I kept thinking to myself, if I could just dodge through his attacks and smack that booty, I'll be golden. But doing that only serves to get you sliced up more times than I care to remember. His attacks have generous range for him, and many are connected to long-strung combos that can destroy you without proper deflects. Unfortunately, I seem to struggle with getting the timing right, so I resorted to using firecrackers and 1-2 punching him for half his bar, then doing my best until he was dead. In hindsight, it's easy to see the reason I struggle was my focus on stepping as my primary defense and not deflecting. If I had forced myself to learn the patterns, I'd have been fine. Instead, I found myself getting chopped to bits until I was able to squeak out a victory. I think what's truly terrifying is that a boss I would consider to be a significant challenge is only coming in at number 10. The difficulty of this game has been lauded by many, and while I definitely got better over the course of my playthrough, the first time is just brutal. Corrupted Monk may not be quite hard enough to warrant that designation, but he is certainly a tough fight. Number 9, Lady Butterfly. This was the first wall I reached in the game. That's because I beat her on my second try, then quickly realized she had an undisclosed phase 2, so I decided to leave and come back later. When I did, I still hadn't nearly become adept at the combat system, but that ended up working out fine because Lady Butterfly can be abused by step counters. Just step behind her attacks and slash her back. It'll make for a long and painful fight, but if you have a fuller gourd and higher vitality like I did, it won't be nearly as punishing. The thing is, even with that, I still died a few times and barely came out alive when I finally did win. That's because of her blistering speed making it hard to deflect well. Resorting to step counters was somewhat reliable, but I still took some damage. Then the second phase adds in all those minions. It's not so bad, just tedious really. I ran around like a lunatic until she converted them to magic and then ran perpendicular to dodge it and resume the fight. Of course, her combos are more lethal and she has magic effects, so it can become really trying on your HP. That's why I put the Lady Butterfly here. While I didn't personally die to her as many times as the monk, I can look at her and see that she's playing the deflection game and hoping for a quick skilled kill would be quite tough to get. Plus, I know for a fact that if I had been adamant about fighting early on, I would have been decimated. For those reasons, I think number 9 is a fair spot for the lady. Number 8, Guardian Ape. Man, I wonder if slaughtering all these apes is gonna anger some sort of alpha primate. I called it. The moment I dropped into a pit of monkeys and started committing chimpicide, I knew it was all over. How did the Guardian Ape respond? This dude picked up shit out of his butt and threw it at me. And he left a poisonous trail of fart. This dude crop dusted all over my favorite strategy. Like Lady Butterfly, I think this fight would be really challenging to do in a more upfront manner. I mean, I tried it for a while and it worked out okay, but damn if these big beast types don't suffer from a few shitboxes in this game. I just want to say in hindsight that I feel immensely stupid for not using firecrackers against a beast. I used them the whole game, but just blanked here for some reason. The ape will throw out a number of different punches, body slams, etc., but the real threat are the grabs. I swear to God those grabs are like glue. Still, the first phase of the monkey wasn't so bad. My girlfriend was actually watching and went to congratulate me as I stopped my recording thinking it was dead. I had to legitimately scramble back to my desk and pick up the controller only to die instantly. This monkey Ludwig wannabe is terrifying, and I'm not just talking about its appearance. By far, his most annoying attack is the terror scream. It has a decent tell, sure, but early on before I could recognize it, I repeatedly fell victim to its shrieks. Once you get the tell, it's really not that bad, but I'm still no fan of an insta-kill status effect. Putting that aside, I found the second phase to have some of the most erratic moves in the game, making it very hard to deflect, so I didn't even try to learn it. Instead, I just used the good old wait and bait. If you run around, the ape will eventually do a lunging attack that is super easy to jump over. It gives you plenty of time to get a few swings in. It did take a while, but the first time I tried that, it was easy victory. The satisfying nature of deflects makes me want to try a different strategy, but I think the one I employed is plenty fair. There's no time limit, and I don't think that every boss necessarily has to be a deflection brawl. Hit and run tactics are totally in character for a shinobi, and they were a big help here. That said, I still died at the ape plenty while figuring all this out, and those grabs and screams are nothing to scoff at, which is enough to land the ape at number 8. Number 7, Headless Ape and his bride. Just when you thought it was over, Headless Ape is back for seconds, and this time he brought his bride along with him. Basically phase 2 of the Headless Ape for part 1 in a smaller arena with no trees, then for phase 2 it's more the same from him, but he brings his bride with him that acts like a first phase Guardian Ape. It was at this point I remembered how effective firecrackers were against beasts, which made this so much easier than it could have been. That said, it's still a hefty struggle dealing with both at the same time, and it requires masterful movement. In my mind, it solidified more that a hit and run strategy is viable here because I can't imagine deflecting both of their blows. Inherently, just by basic math, this fight gets the edge over its singular counterpart, but I will say that I was able to beat it on my first try thanks to all my experience with the Lone Guardian. I loved that too because it tells me that like Justin Souls, even if you get beat down, you are learning and you are improving. Good thing too because I needed it for the final 6. Number 6, Great Shinobi Owl. If when the time comes you decide that the Shinobi code is up to the Shinobi's interpretation and forsake your father instead, you get to brawl with the Great Owl himself. And let me tell you, he fights like a damn Shinobi. Traps galore, ranging from firecrackers to little cursed balls that stop you from using recovery items for what feels like an eternity. Great design though, because when he uses either trap, they are easy to dodge and leave him open as long as you aren't careless. I was never very good at deflecting the blows of bigger enemies in the game, and boy did the owl make me learn. He does leave himself vulnerable before attacking, so you can get damage in if you hit him first, but it's a big risk. Personally, I lean toward whittling him down over time as the fight went on. After taking 1 health bar, he'll beg for his life, which is of course another trap. Now he's got smoke bombs to disorient you, and he can spew poison. Lovely. And if he happens to curse you, you can heal it. Other than those additional traps though, he's very much the same here. The attack where he throws 2 shuriken and lunges to strike the ground is a great time to dodge and get behind for vitality damage. Otherwise, I spent most of my time trading blows between attacking and deflecting. He has at least 4 or 5 different attack variants, so you can never rely too heavily on patterns and instead are forced to be reactionary, which is no easy task. All in all, you need to learn how to effectively deflect his blows, then step counter behind on his firecrackers and air slam for solid damage. Using firecrackers of your own is helpful, and do your best to avoid attacking recklessly when he throws curse orbs, because even though he's open, you may push into them. I actually found that attacking him directly during this could push you away from it, keeping the pressure on. It's a great piece of design that matches the high risk, high reward playstyle well. Certainly a very tough battle, but it only gets tougher from here. Number 5, True Corrupted Monk. Now this is how you do a reskin, if you can even call it that. First of all, the setting on the bridge lined in the clouds with red leaves scattered is stunning. I can't help but gush over how beautiful Fountainhead is. The fight is the same as the one you did before. You might find it easier this time with increased vitality, posture, and attack power that you likely have, because I know I sure did. In my first attempt, I even managed to get a stealth start and skip the first phase entirely. In fact, I found out later that it's possible to use the trees to skip both of the first phases, but this is about my first playthrough. I did end up dying to Terra in my first battle in the final phase, so when I did it a second time, I tried the first phase and it is the same battle, except for the corruption, that is. Every now and again, he'll send out 3 illusionary copies of himself. You could probably use snap seeds to get around this, but I settled for zooming around in the trees like a flying squirrel until he quit it. The second phase is more of the same, but still very lethal. The final phase shows the parasite within, and that's where he adds a spinning attack that accumulates terror. What I found to be really remarkable was that I was deflecting like a god in this battle, where in the first I could only firecracker to get his health down and hope for the best. The Al and GENICHIRO collectively did make me a lot better at this game, but still, looking at it, I can tell that mechanically this fight is more difficult, and it has 3 health bars, so it's definitely one of the tougher ones in the game. And I'm sure if I went back to the Al now, I could take him down easier than before. Actually, number 4, Al Father. By God, this dude does not fuck around. He is a shell of his former self. Actually, it's better to say that this caterpillar that was already pretty damn difficult in his own right has evolved to become a majestic butterfly that is gonna slash you down with so many variations on old combos and new combos that it'll make your head spin. I would have made an analogy instead of using a caterpillar and a butterfly, but you'll have to settle for that shitty pun. This fight requires every sense you've been honing over the course of the game, but for me, it also required a metered level of patience. The Al breaks your posture so quickly while holding up his own well until you reduce some vitality, so damaging his is vital to your success. I play the fight by waiting for certain attacks that I know I can counter and am otherwise passive. His double shuriken and slam is still a great time to hit him, but he does it far less often. Another great one is deflecting a long combo that ends in him throwing firecrackers. You can jump to your right at the proper time and get behind him for a slash or two. I also love his dash forward because it has a pretty forgiving timing on the Makiri counter. Using the counter is crucial because if you don't, he unleashes a massive sword spin that will likely one-shot you in combination. Still, all of these attacks, counters, and deflections aren't easy, and that's excusing all the other combos he can throw at you that are much harder to act on. In the second phase, instead of using poison and smoke, he literally becomes invisible at times as he summons his Al. Now you'll have to deal with the Al flying around and doing an AoE explosion on occasion, the dad Al disappearing during some of your attack windows, then appearing out of nowhere to destroy you, and he'll throw the Al in a dramatic flame attack that needs to be jumped over. Even though it may be easy to jump over, the catch is that he does his thrust right after, and if you don't get down to Makiri it, prepare to die. Of course, if you can hit it, you also get a guaranteed Makiri counter, so that can work to your advantage. It's actually not too bad in comparison to the first phase, but the first phase is plenty demanding already, so pick your poison. With all that in mind, it's thanks to his viable and very generous counter damage windows that he doesn't reach higher on the list. But with how hard this game is, 4 is quite the accomplishment. Number 3, ISSHIN ASHINA. After defeating Emma, an already decently challenging boss in her own right, you're thrown directly into a fight with ISSHIN. For the first phase, he feels like a more powerful yet still very graceful and similar version of Emma. He can lunge across half of the arena at any time, even sprinting forward to limit your moments of reprieve to heal, which can be brutal with the difficulty considered. He's got a number of combos, some which start with the same attacks and then change midway through, so you always have to be on your toes when it comes to deflecting. Like Emma, he has all 3 of the unblockables and they do devastating damage, as does his usage of the Ichimangi, though it's a great time to slash at his vitality and get a solid deflection. Your best bet is to deflect as much as possible and be aggressive with attacks. If you want a different strategy, you could use the defensive sugar and axe for big blows, which really damages his posture. Once his vitality gets lower, it gets more realistic to get that posture up and get a death strike, to which he responds by buffing into the God of Fire. This phase is insane. Emma in his first phase were already enough, but now it's a whole set of new attacks, many of which have one-shot potential. Look at this attack, who is this Virgil wannabe? The hardest part is the limited time to learn. If you get here, you might get roasted immediately. Then you have to go back through Emma in the first phase to get here again. That made me get real good at those first 2 parts. His fire attacks are all very telegraphed and have direct counters, like getting behind the fire sweep with a timely jump, but it's so much easier said than done in the moment. I actually scream with joy when I beat him because without question it took the most lives out of me. That is, except for our next boss. Number 2, Demon of Hatred. Just when I thought we were done with fire. This aptly named boss was the bane of my existence. I genuinely think I must have died over 30 times here. There's a few reasons. Let's start with foot ship boxes. They seriously hit you when you aren't even touching them sometimes, but I guess it's like some kind of quake effect. Now I know I could have just blocked the foot stomps if I needed to, and I tried that for a while, but it just wasn't working for me in this fight to block or deflect. I needed to run around like a fast ninja going for quick strikes and circling to juke, which works on a lot of things like the foot stomp, the arm thrust, and it works if you jump into one of his many arm swings that open up terrifying one-shot wombo combos. The two other reasons for my troubles were two attacks that I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to dodge: the fireball throw and the charge. The fireball throw was a mechanic that made me realize that it's best to stay up close, and if I can't make it to him in time to be ahead of the fireballs, I should just wait it out. And I mean wait, if you rush in too soon, he throws a second set. For the charge, it's actually really simple. Just jump away. And I knew this, and yet I would still step at least 80% of the time. The thing is that even this far into the game, when it comes to panicking at the last moment, instincts kick in and I press circle as my lifeline from years of Soul's instinct. It's a habit that has taken an entire playthrough to break even 20%, so I got a long way to go. In the second phase, he'll start throwing out a few new fire attacks, namely this hard to dodge fire wave and these homing fireballs. Both have great counters, with the fire wave allowing you to swing and if dodge correctly, and him doing this weird stance that allows you to get hits in if you can masterfully dodge his balls. That's a timely word because that's where you'll be spending the majority of your fight, right under his demon balls reaching around to his hot ass. Staying in close to him has a tendency to lure out his body slam attack, which I do love. It has a generous tell that allows you to get some guaranteed hits in during a fight that is otherwise intense as hell. In the final phase, he'll start swinging his arm around, trapping you in a circle of hell, then he'll start sprinting around, charging multiple times. With all these attacks giving you so much to react to and also doing some of the highest damage in the game, it can be insane to overcome this battle of endurance. What keeps him in check slightly is that a lot of his attacks do have big windows of attack opportunity afterward, and he also stuns twice per phase. Still, it's without question one of the hardest bosses in the game, but there's one final boss that surpasses even the fires of this demon for the very hardest. Number 1, ISSHIN, the Sword Saint.
I'm back.
Yes, you are, though for most of you, it's much more likely that you've faced this ISSHIN before the other, with this battle coming at the end of the game for when you don't for Sekiro. Everything about this fight is incredible. The setting, the music, the fight itself, and damn if it isn't one of the hardest bosses I've overcome in a long time. In the first phase, he feels like a master samurai of the ASHINA. He'll do a number of different combos that have varied timings to throw you off. He also has incredible closing speed, doing big slashes with energy shooting out that require precise jumps and steps to avoid. He'll also use the Ichimongi double, which is a great time to deflect and counter after getting a strike or two in. This battle is all out aggression. Attack as often as you can and deflect everything. His posture doesn't come back very quickly once you've gotten a little bit of HP down, so once again, the prosthetic axe does wonders here. He does a lot of unblockable thrusts, which can be great for Mikiri counters, and he does a forward slash that is easy to get behind or even jump counter. Once he goes to phase 2 though, goddamn, throw it all out the window. The dude wields a sword and a spear. Here his attack patterns become more fast, aggressive, the combos are longer and more erratic, he has increased range due to the spear, and though his patterns are graceful, they are almost feral at times. He runs around like a shinobi would and then is suddenly slamming you from across the map with a spear, followed by multiple sword slashes at breakneck speed. The final phase is more the same, except he adds in a lightning strike. I wish I was good enough to counter this and send it flying back at him, but I was so panicked after making it to the final phase of what is essentially a 4-phase fight that I stuck to my standard attack and deflect to win. That's right, I forgot to mention that this fight comes directly after GENICHIRO Way of the Tomo with no break. Even if he is relatively easy to overcome, especially when compared to ISSHIN, his shenanigans can set you up for a painful time with the rest if he takes too much health away. What makes this fight the most difficult isn't any one component. Like any of the other bosses, he does have windows for you to counter, though they may be small, and mastery of his moveset and tells will let you climb his posture break ladder faster and faster. What seals it is the package together. For me, no fight in the game throughout all of its phases had the potential to kill me so often at any moment with such a minimal margin for error. For example, there was a time when I got through phase 1 in about 20 seconds. Then he proceeded to obliterate me the moment phase 2 began. You have to be at your absolute best throughout every facet of this fight to claim victory, and when your margin of error is brought to the tiniest brink like that, that's what it means to be the hardest boss in a game. But of course, that's just my opinion. The beauty of these games is that we always have different experiences, so be sure to share yours with me in the comments below. As I mentioned before, I will eventually do a community ranking, but I want to give everyone a fair chance to play the game at their own pace. Until then, be sure to subscribe for more videos on Sekiro, including mini-boss rankings and reviews, and also rankings on other games like Zelda and Devil May Cry. And if you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like. It means a lot to me to know you're enjoying the content. I want to thank you all for watching today. Much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.